Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, then please consider subscribing. Most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please take this time to subscribe. Turn on notifications so you'll never miss a story and be the first to hear. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. The excitement of our upcoming camping trip was intense as we gathered our gear and prepared to leave the city behind. We had been planning this trip for months, eager to escape the stress of our daily lives and spend some quality time in nature. We had chosen a secluded spot deep in the forest, far from the noise and distractions of civilization. As we drove deeper into the woods, the scenery around us changed. The buildings and traffic were replaced by towering trees and sparkling rivers. The air was fresh and clean, and we felt ourselves relaxing with every passing mile. As we arrived at our chosen campsite, we quickly set to work setting up our tents and gathering firewood. We had come prepared with plenty of supplies, including hot dogs, hamburgers, chips, and soda. The scent of cooking food filled the air, and we'd all felt our appetites growing as we settled in around the campfire. We laughed and shared stories, enjoying the peaceful surroundings and the company of good friends. But as the sun began to set, we heard a sound that chilled us to the bone. It was a loud, piercing shriek like the sound of a woman in agony. We froze, wondering what could have caused such a terrifying noise. The scream continued, growing louder and more intense with every passing moment. We were too scared to leave our tents, too afraid to venture out into the dark forest to see what was causing the noise. We huddled together, praying that whatever was out there would go away. But the screaming continued for what felt like hours, getting closer and closer to our campsite with every passing minute. We were shaking with fear, wondering what kind of creature could make such a terrifying sound. Eventually, the noise stopped, and we all fell into an uneasy sleep, too exhausted and scared to stay awake any longer. The next morning, we awoke to find a strange symbol on the ground near our campsite. It was a cross made out of sticks, with its arms broken and its message unclear. We were all too scared to talk about what had happened, too afraid to dwell on the memory of that terrible noise. We packed up our things quickly, eager to leave that forest behind and return to the safety of our homes. But the memory of that night lingered with us long after we returned to the city. We'd all found ourselves wondering what could have caused that scream, what kind of creature or entity could be lurking in the dark forest. We debated the meaning of the broken cross, wondering if it was a warning or a message from something sinister. We tried to put the incident behind us, but it was impossible. The memory of that night haunted us all, and it still sent shivers down our spines. In the weeks that followed, we found ourselves searching for answers. We scoured the internet for information on strange noises in the forest, on unexplained phenomena and local legends. We talked to experts in the field of paranormal investigation, hoping to find someone who could shed some light on what had happened that night. But the more we searched, the more we realized that there were no easy answers. The forest remained a mystery, its secrets hidden deep within its ancient trees. As time passed, we each went on with our lives, but we never forgot that night in the forest. We still talk about it from time to time, wondering if we will ever truly understand what happened that night. We know that we may never have all the answers, that the forest will always be a place of mystery and uncertainty. But we also know that we will always have each other, the memory of that shared experience bringing us closer together and reminding us of the power of friendship in the face of fear. Last summer, my family and I decided to go on a camping trip in the nearby woods. We were all excited to spend some time together in nature and get away from our busy lives for a few days. After setting up our tents, we started a fire and cooked up some hot dogs and some soup. We talked, laughed, and had a great time just enjoying each other's company. As the night went on, we all settled into our tents and fell asleep pretty quickly. But then something strange happened. We all woke up in the middle of the night, sweating and shaking. When we talked about it in the morning, we realized we all had the same nightmare. In the dream, we saw a creepy old lady with long black hair and piercing eyes. She was casting some kind of spell on us, and we couldn't move or speak. We tried to shake it off and enjoy the rest of our trip, but things just kept getting weirder. We heard strange noises in the woods at night, and our stuff kept going missing. It was like somewhere something was watching us. We even found strange symbols carved into some trees around our campsite. At first, we thought it was just some bored teenagers messing around. but the symbols seemed too intricate and too intentional to be just a prank. We were all on edge, wondering what was going on. But then we realized that the so-called witch from our dream might just be a coincidence. It was just our minds playing tricks on us, right? Well, that's what we thought until the last night of our trip. We were all settling in for the night, trying to get some sleep before we had to pack up and head back home the next day. That's when we heard it. It was a low, guttural chanting coming from somewhere outside our tents. It sounded like it was getting closer and closer, and we were all frozen with fear. We didn't dare move or speak, just listened as the chanting grew louder and more intense. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. We all breathed a sigh of relief and tried to calm ourselves down. But then we heard footsteps, like someone was walking around our campsite. We heard things being moved and rustling in the bushes. We huddled together in our tents, not knowing what to do. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything went silent. The next morning, we packed up our campsite and headed home, relieved to be leaving the woods behind. But to all of us, something felt a little too spooky and out of place. We couldn't explain the symbols, the chanting, or the footsteps we had heard. A few weeks later, we saw a news report about a group of hikers who had gone missing in the same woods we had been camping in. They found their tents torn apart and their belongings scattered around. But the strangest thing was the symbols carved into the trees nearby. It looked just like the ones we had seen in our trip. We were all shaken by the news, wondering what might have happened if we had stayed in the woods any longer. Was it just a coincidence that we had all had the same nightmare? Or was there something truly sinister going on in those woods? We never went camping in those woods again, and we still get chills thinking about what might have happened if we had stayed there any longer. Sometimes nightmares can be more than just dreams, and sometimes the things we fear the most are the things we can't explain. I'm an outdoor, adventurous kind of guy. I love the thrill of the hike, the challenge of the climb, and the sense of peace that comes with being out in nature. So when I heard about the national park in Yorkshire, England, I knew I had to go. It's one of the most beautiful parks in the UK, with miles of trails, stunning scenery, and plenty of opportunities for camping. I packed up my gear and set off for a solo trip, ready to spend a few days in the wilderness. The first day was amazing. I hiked for hours, taking in the sights and sounds of the park. I found a great spot to set up camp near a babbling brook and got to work gathering firewood and setting up my tent. That night, I cooked up some beans over the fire and settled in for a good night's sleep, but then something woke me up in the middle of the night. At first, I wasn't sure what it was. I just felt uncomfortable, like something wasn't right. But then I noticed that my camping knife was missing, and so was my flare gun. I always kept them close by in case of an emergency, so the fact that they were gone made me feel vulnerable and exposed. I started to become anxious and panic. I had heard stories of people getting attacked by bears or wolves in the park. Heck, sometimes sick, deranged people, and without my trusty weapons, I felt vulnerable and exposed. I tried to calm myself down and started telling myself that maybe I had just misplaced them. I can get quite clumsy at times. But deep down, I knew something was wrong because my knife is something I always keep close by. I was wondering who could have taken my gear. Was a person or maybe an animal picked it up not knowing what it was? I tried to ignore my fears and go back to sleep, but there was no point. I lay there in my tent, wide awake and on high alert. As the first light of dawn started to filter through my tent, I decided to investigate. I grabbed my flashlight and started to walk around my campsite, looking for any clues as to what had happened. That's when I stumbled upon a disturbing scene. I found a dead deer, its belly carved open and its organs spilled out. The sight made me feel sick to my stomach. I knew that whoever or whatever had done this was not to be messed with. I quickly realized that I needed to pack up and get out of there. I didn't feel safe anymore, and I knew that I was in danger. I hastily gathered my gear and started to hike out of the park as quickly as I could. But as I hiked, I had a feeling in the back of my mind that someone was following me. Every time I turned around, I felt like I was being watched. I tried to keep my cool and tell myself that it was just my imagination. But deep down, I knew that something was off. When I finally reached the safety of my car, I breathed a huge sigh of relief. I was still traumatized and on edge, but I knew that I had made the right decision to leave when I did. I reported the incident to the park rangers, who were equally disturbed by what had happened. They promised to investigate and to increase their patrols in the area to keep other hikers and campers safe. Since that trip, I've never gone camping or hiking alone again. I realized that even the most experienced and prepared hikers can find themselves in dangerous situations, and it's always better to be on the side of caution. Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.